Dominica Degrandis.
Hi. In this interview, Dominica Degrandis talks about raising children as a single mom while studying, the importance of reflecting after achieving a goal, and we also talked about seeing yourself in online meetings. And I have to say that, yeah, I changed my behavior in online meetings since this conversation. Dominica really made me think, and I'm turning off my camera for myself now after this conversation. And it's indeed it's much more relaxed. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Welcome, Dominica. Good evening. Well, for me it's evening. And what's the time on your side?
I'm in Seattle, Washington, and it's about noon.
And here is Belgium. So indeed, so it's a lot, well, almost a time travel or something like that. So I get the feeling that it's rather sunny on your side, and here it's completely dark already. So yes.
Yeah, usually it's all rainy here, but we got some sun this week. It's been lovely.
Great,
Yeah.
great. So Dominica, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you want people to know about you?
Well, I work at Tasktop. I'm a flow advisor, so I help companies make their work visible to measure the flow of work through their value streams. Work at Tasktop doing that for 5 years now. But I'm probably better known as author of Making Work Visible.
That's this book. It took me a while to show it, but that's this book I'm making.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And the biggest news this week is that the second edition was just released yesterday.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Okay, so that might actually be good news for me because I haven't finished it, and so that I can immediately finish the last book. But unfortunately, I have the first edition next to me. It's with already some scribblings in it, so I'm about halfway, but I'm reading too many books, so I'm not able to finish it.
Yeah, book whip has been a lot this year so far. I've been reading so many books. And it looks like I see, do you have Daniel Kahneman's latest noise book? Is that his noise book? Yeah. Yeah, I found that too.
I finished it. It's a really interesting book.
Fascinating read. It actually got me rereading some parts of Thinking Fast and Slow, particularly around all the biases, the confidence bias and the different biases that people have, and how that contributes to the noise that he talks about. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's a fascinating book. It feels that it's well, not better written. I don't know. It reads a little bit easier than Thinking Fast and Slow, but it's thicker to read, so it takes about the same time probably.
Yeah, for sure.
So we jumped right into that, and you talked about the whip, and I can't resist to show this picture that I found. I think on your website. I just love it. More no and less whip. I thought, wow, this is a really a nice statement to make, and indeed that we sometimes have too many things work in progress, and indeed I have too many books in progress. That's not always helping.
Yeah. People always ask me why I made the no green, and that was quite intentional versus red, because sometimes no is a good thing. We need to, if we're going to get the work of our lives done, we need to make time for it. And that means saying no to some other really great things that are on our plate to do, that we want to do, that our boss wants us to do, that our family want us to do. But we really need to focus in order to get our work done. So people tend to like the sticker. I made a bunch of them. Used to pass them out at conferences. For a long time, people still ask me for them.
Yeah, I haven't seen the stickers, but yeah, I just saw the image and I was like, wow, this is really because indeed, well, if you can't say no, for me, your yes doesn't mean anything. If you just say yes to everything, and indeed, I'm a strong believer that a no is a positive word. Um, we it might feel it might feel aggressive if people tell it to me. It's like, whoa, why do you say no? But yeah, it's good in many things that if we know how to say no. So we already jumped right into the conversation. I love it. Uh, so I want to go to that first question, and I'm sure we'll jump right up in different directions today already. But what is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
When I was 18, I wanted to travel the world, and
Mhm.
I set off by myself, and Hawaii was my first stop. And I lived in Hawaii for 22 years.
Oh, so you want to travel the world, but you stopped at the first stop.
The first stop was in Hawaii. I lived there for 22 years. All four of my children were born there. I ended up going to the University of Hawaii um, for computer science. And then I ended up working at Boeing, had a contract with the Air Force and outside of Honolulu.
Wow.
And that's where I first went into configuration management on IBM mainframes. And so the living in Hawaii, my children are all part Hawaiian. So the
Hmm.
Hawaiian cultures and traditions have really impacted um, my my way of thinking and my fondness for three generational living. And life in Hawaii is a bit slower, and so I think
Hmm.
it's really impacted the the speed of my speech. So
Hmm.
I tend to talk a lot slower than, say, folks from New York who talk really fast. Um, but yeah, going to school in Hawaii was, uh, if surf was up, then there weren't that many people in class. And so I got to have more time with the professor when that was happening. And
So
it's a
so
great.
you weren't there for surfing, but you enjoyed the time with your professor at the moment.
Well, I mean, I enjoy the beach. The beach is lovely. Hawaii is such a great place to raise children. You know, he needs a diaper for most of the time. And there's so much family support there to help raise your children, raise your family.
Hmm.
It's really what got me through school because I had two children before I went to university. So it took
Wow.
8 years to get my degree because I would work 1 year and then um, go to school 1 year, and the family would help out. You know, my mother-in-law, my cousins and sister-in-laws would all help watch the kids.
Wow. So you were in yeah. So studying while being a very young mother.
Mhm.
That's wow. Well, I find it's really amazing because it's yeah for me the time you do for study doesn't really matter because I believe in lifelong learning, so it feels like we never stop learning,
Yeah,
but doing something like university while being it's already daunting to do that because the work is hard and learning and being a young parent is also life changing, I can say. So combining these, that's amazing. Wow.
yeah. And
That's
after school, well, because I had worked at Boeing at Hickam Air Force Base outside of Honolulu, that's when I came back when we moved back to the mainland here. I got my job I got another job with Boeing doing configuration management and builds and release management. But, instead of IBM mainframes, now it's, Windows 95, whatever. And so I just continued that thread of doing, source code control, configuration management, builds, release management, building out environments, through several different jobs. I left Boeing. I went to a startup, and then for just a few years, and then I worked at Corbis. Corbis was Bill Gates's other company. It
Yeah,
does.
David Anderson worked there, if I
Yeah,
remember
that's
correctly.
from David Anderson. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's where we started doing Kanban for IT ops. And well, for our sustainment programs. I'm probably unusual in that I didn't come from an agile background. I
Mm.
came from a traditional waterfall project management straight into Kanban and flow. And so at Corbis, we rolled out, it's a story that David Anderson talks about in his Kanban book, but that was our group. And we worked with, and Don Reinertson came to visit, and it was just you never realize in the moment the periods of time that are going to be really influential and significant. But yeah, we were doing, this is 2005, 2006 maybe, and there were groups that were starting to do Scrum, but I wasn't really part of it because I was in IT ops. So I was building out environments, doing database restores, doing source code control, and lots of merging of code, and working late at night, getting builds out. And once we started doing flow, we started fixing our debt with our builds and automating those pipelines. And where a release used to take all weekend, and we would pray that the site would be up by Monday morning, the kind of releases where the project manager brings food in for the whole weekend. Some people are sleeping under their desks, to being able to release on a Wednesday afternoon and go home for dinner. And that experience made it so that when I left Corbis and I went to work for a telecom that was still doing waterfall and project management, I didn't last very long.
Because you were used to flow, and because you used to yeah, you
I
saw
got
the future in a
spoiled.
sense.
Yeah, I got spoiled, and I would present a few things to groups at the telecom, but it's really hard to work work across a value stream using a pull system when there is a traditional project management in technology anyway. I think it's hard to do if there's a traditional project management process in place, because you could have multiple developers working on several different projects, or you could have a shared services team having to support all these different projects. And that's why I think Mick Kirsten's book on project to product is so fundamentally a game changer for this age of digital disruption. That's this one here.
That's this
Yeah.
one, huh? Right. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And indeed, I have my copy here as well. So it's
Did you have you had a chance to thumb through it?
no, it was below your book, so that's why I received it. I think at DevOps Days Ghent, I received a copy. I don't know, I don't remember anymore by who. So it's already a few years on my desk. But yeah, it's
DevOps Days Ghent. Oh, I had intended to go. Was it 2018, 2019? I just
2019, the 10 years edition.
10 years. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I would. It must have been amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to say a lot about it because I was part of the organizing team. Of course, I find it then amazing, but I'm kind of biased. But yeah, so
Oh, yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and actually by coincidence, I'm wearing a T-shirt about from it. But yeah, so I had no idea that you were interested in going there. But it's indeed it's yeah, it's an amazing number of people that joined here in Ghent just a few months before we went into the lockdown. Actually, I think it was October 2019, and then in March we went into lockdown. So that's not that long after that. If you look back, especially now, 2 years later. It's an amazing story that you're telling because indeed, well, what you say about project management, I think this is still true today, but back then, it was a lot harder to even tell to these people, but there is a better world because they haven't seen it and they haven't seen it in larger corporations.
Yeah.
Today, we're a step further, but still, I see some traditional project managers that yeah that think they're smarter and they haven't seen it and they haven't, like you say, they haven't experienced like you have experienced it, so
Yeah. Well,
then sometimes it's hard.
it's such a different frame of mind. Um, with projects, there's just so many talk all day about the differences between managing by project and managing by product. And one of the biggest things is the funding model,
Mhm.
right? If you're gonna try and get your project funded all up front, if you have to identify how much this thing's going to cost in your project a year before the budgeting cycle to get that in, that money is set there. And so there's risk associated with that now, because how are you going to know everything you need to know a year ahead of time of building something new? It's one reason why there's resistance to doing small batch size changes or making improvements to products along the way, like we see with managing work by product. So there's the funding model and the budgeting cycle that's a big difference. And also with projects, people are brought to the work,
Mhm.
right? So you have projects spin up and spin down, and people work on a project and then they roll off to go work on another project, and they're trying to wrap things up and start new things, and there's all these rushed handoffs and releases that occur where uh, there's this, people may need to be trained, or that you lose that domain knowledge, but your domain
Mhm.
knowledge, skill set, domain knowledge walks off that project and goes to work on another project. And it's like you're almost treated like fungible resources instead of the skilled, knowledgeable experts that they are. And with products, we bring the work to the people. So we have long standing, dedicated teams who are in control of all the work that's flowing through the value stream for that product and delivering it. There's a whole different, you're delivering customer value, where project, you might be delivering a bunch of stuff. And also with product, you're going to allocate capacity to fix technical debt for that product. So necessary. With projects, I remember being at the telecom, and it was like, not in my project. Do you want to do what? Do you want to do fix some technical debt? Not in my project. So there, so much.
Technical debt kept, yeah, growing in a sense.
It's IT never had a seat at the table. IT was considered a cost center.
Yes.
And so you couldn't have shared goals between IT leaders and business leaders. IT never had a seat at the table in that model. So it's really frustrating because the kinds of improvements that are needed to avoid coding taking longer and longer and longer because the technical debt never gets fixed, or your machines don't have the latest security patches.
All that kind of things that we indeed in DevOps and in continuous delivery, deployment and everything try to solve. You've been talking already, you mentioned already the word IT multiple times, and that for me is kind of also the link to that next question, that if you would not have been to IT, do you have any idea what would have become of you? Was there at any point in time an idea to do something else as IT?
Oh, yeah, I think I would have been an architect or a designer for residential homes.
Buildings or homes, and wow.
Mm-hmm.
And where did that interest come from? Where was that inspired to?
It's just innate, I think. Everywhere I go, I'm looking at the buildings, the architecture, the design. I go to a restaurant, I'm looking at the beams and the structure, and we do some remodeling, and we built 2 outbuildings here on our property and a cabin, and I did the design and picked out all the materials, and then I stood around and held the dumb end of the tape measure while my husband did all the hard work in the building, and my sons. But we're still.
But you had the grand idea, let's put it like that, and also the details, because design is also about details, of course.
Yeah, I really like design.
Wow. Okay. That's well, it's at the same time something completely different and at the same time similar, because it's also a lot of attention for a system, which in a sense in IT it's also, we're designing a system, and when you're working on flow, you're kind of working on a system as well. It's then not the software or anything, it's not the deployment, but it's the team design or whatever the process around that.
Getting all the supplies and the products, and if you see what's happening to our supply chain now, I can imagine why construction is taking so long to do. I told you I fired myself from the telecom because they were so rooted in managing. Well, also the culture wasn't the best there, and just rooted in very traditional waterfall ways of working. So I took a 5-month break from that,
Wow.
and I wanted to really get into sustainability and social responsibility, related to climate change. And but I just had a hard time finding a doorway into that field. And so then I was talking to a few people, and David Andreson asked me, well, do you want to come teach Kanban for DevOps? Do you want to do a curriculum, a course? Because they've been doing Kanban for development at David Andreson. But he knew my background in IT ops. So that's when I switched over and started traveling all around. Went to Belgium. Patrick Debois helped me get a workshop classroom area in Ghent, and it was the right time. I was very lucky. I was just at the right time, at the right place, and because I had all this background over all those years, I was able to put together a curriculum, and I created a Kanban for DevOps board game that was based off of Russell Healy's board game that had been created for development. And so that's how I got started, and it was in 2011. My first place I went to was Spotify in Stockholm, and
Wow.
met with them because they were one of the first. This is in 2011. First time to Europe, February. I go to Sweden in February. I don't have
Okay.
or anything. It's kind of funny. I'm trying to walk down the street. My boots aren't doing very good. And this, 75-year-old woman just like walks right past me in her tennis shoes. I didn't learn how to walk on the ice very well. But I went to Jim Do in Hamburg, and I met Ian Carroll in the UK. So I traveled around to see how these organizations in Europe were doing Kanban for
Wow.
IT. And I combined that with my experience that we had doing Flow and Kanban at Corbis and came up with this course. And I did that for 7 years or so. And then I decided that I wanted to stay at home a little bit more and not travel so much.
Because
And
it can be tiring if you, well, training is also very nice, but it's always with new people and it's, yeah, around the world. So it's, yeah, especially if you, well, what you say, you had 4 children. So that's,
yeah,
that is a large family. So that
they
means
were
that, yeah.
by then they were all graduated from high school. So they were on adults and they're all doing well. But
But they didn't need you anymore at that time, in a
not
sense.
yet. I don't think I would have. I know a lot of women do that now. I'm not quite sure how they do it, but for me, that wouldn't have worked for me to travel with my
Mhm.
kids still in school. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, yeah, for me, and it's always a struggle as well, even as a man, to see, okay, how do we organize ourselves? There is also a reason why I'm doing now. Even my children, they're not graduated, but well, they're a little bit older, 14 till 19. But still, I'm trying to do, well, one of the reasons why I'm doing this recordings is that I don't need to travel that much in the next year and a half. I don't know how long I will do this, but to keep in touch and make a lot of new friends,
Yeah.
still doing this from home, like you say, because the traveling, it can get tiring, and that's one thing that the lockdown of COVID has taught us. Like, it is actually possible to do some stuff from home, and so, yeah, that's a nice experiment for me.
Also, consulting for a long time, I really wanted to work longer with a team.
Mm.
Like I wanted to become part of the problem, which you can't do if you're a consultant because you don't stick around long enough. If you stick around, if you're working
Mhm.
with a company, you're an employee, then you get your hands dirty again and and start to see how you can affect change in that organization. And that's what I mean by becoming part of the problem. Like you're around for.
Yeah, you can see when the things are happening, breaking down, becoming better, things like that, and not just giving advice and then be gone again.
Digging out. Yeah, it's one thing to be a consultant and give advice and then, see you later. It's another thing to try and work day
And
to
solve
day
it just,
with
work
teams.
day to day. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I went to work for Lean Kit, which is now PlanView Lean Kit. And that was a great experience. Was there for a couple years. And then I started writing my book about that time, and then I went to work for Task Top in 2017, and that's where we've been focused more on helping teams make that change from project to product, helping them to shift from looking at how things are measured. In the book, Mick talks about Nokia, which at one of the earlier Agile conferences, 2007, 2009, was the
Mhm.
poster child. Everybody at the Agile conference had Nokia in their
My
presentation.
pocket. Yeah.
And but how they were measured was proxy metrics or vanity metrics. How many people were certified in Scrum? These metrics that just don't they don't
It's
give
more the
you,
outcome. Yeah.
they don't give you any visibility on the customer value that's flowing through the value stream. And so we still see that people want to measure story points. And I mean, that's fine at the team level. I don't want to, sorry, I shouldn't have made that funny face. But if IT and business are going to have a seat at the table, then they need to have common shared goals and understanding. And so we need to speak the language of the business, and story points, they don't compute, right?
Well, yeah, it was helpful at some point, and for me, the value is in the estimation is more about bringing. Are we at the same level? Do we understand each other as a team? And so, if I vote high and someone else votes low, then we know that we have a miscommunication. So we need to talk. But there are other ways. We found other ways to do that communication and to find that information by having smaller stories and stuff like that. So yeah, the story points. It's
Great considerations working with the team. Lately, last couple years, I have been more focused on looking at the end-to-end value stream that customers and business teams care about, and optimizing the flow of the whole value stream versus just optimizing at the team level. And it's been a real challenge with organizations who measure, tell me how you're going to measure me, I'll tell you how I'm going to behave. So when teams are measured just at the team level, especially if it's just a functional team, then there's no incentive to deliver customer value faster.
exactly that. Yeah, it's not going to help there.
Yeah. So
And
that's
so tell me, I want to go to the next question because it's you're such a great talker, and there's so many great stories, but I'm afraid that we'll end up here being 3 hours, and we don't have that time. So, but my next question feels very much in line with your story actually. So you talk about challenges. Could you share with us what is the biggest challenge that you have, and why that's a good thing for you?
Where I need help. One of the biggest challenges I have is working with groups of people who are trying to, it's being mandated at their organization to use our tool, or try and learn flow, try and understand value stream management, but they don't have the time, they don't have the capacity, and but they're doing it because they feel that they don't have authority or agency to make decisions to improve the way they work. They're just going through the motions to please the boss, and because they're thinking, well, next year we're going to have a new boss, and next year we're going to have a whole other framework to learn, and I'm just going to go through the motions here, and and pretend that
That I'm going to like this method and whatever, and like you say, yeah, next year there will be another method and another consultant or another person trying to
yeah,
sell something else. That is a hard problem to solve.
yeah. So
If people have ideas, that's definitely something to hear in the comments. If people say like, okay, here is a tip for Dominica how to do that and how they would solve it, if it's solvable. So how are you dealing with this?
well, I'm looking at their culture. Is it generative? Is it bureaucratic? Is it pathological? And how much fear plays into this, and how much some of the biases that we mentioned in Author of Noise, and how these confidence biases that many leaders have, how that plays in to the work dynamics and the decisions that get made. And when a leader asks a question or answers a question first, then the team will go down that path, right? Versus a leader who's listening to his
I
team
talked last.
and wants to hear what they have to say first. And trying to coach executives in looking at flow and making their work visible.
And having the data speak for itself. That's what I'm hearing. Using their own data, using the flow and the data from how things are.
Making the work visible, and then measuring 4 key flow metrics. So that's your flow load, which is your WIP. How much load does this team have on it? And what is the impact to their flow velocity, their throughput, and how that combination impacts their flow time, their speed, and flow efficiency.
Yeah, I like that, because indeed we there is so much tension to work faster, and that it's like, yeah, what a friend of mine says is they try to push more cars onto a stuck highway. Well, it doesn't help, and you might feel frustrated because the highway is stuck, but there is no way you can solve it on your own. Actually, we need to slow down, all of us, before we can go faster.
Yeah.
But if some of us are trying to wiggle our car between the traffic, that actually make things worse for everyone. Maybe except for that one person doing that wiggling, but if many people are doing it, it's actually
Well,
it's much worse.
I think it doesn't matter if you have a Ferrari, if the fastest you can go is the traffic in front of you, then it doesn't matter what kind of Ferrari you have. And this is another challenge that we have is with organizations is they don't know where their bottleneck is.
Mm-hmm.
Teams are measured at the team level. But as Jonathon Smarts says, water scrum fall, right? You have, if your bottleneck is upstream in triage or in funding or waiting on approvals, then it doesn't matter how fast development can go.
Yeah, and like you say, when you talk about Ferraris, well, you can hire the smartest and the best developers, and expensive or not doesn't really matter. But if they're really smart people, if it's somewhere stuck somewhere else, yeah. Again, you could even have a smart Ferrari and then have the best Formula One driver in the car. It still won't help you if you're stuck in traffic. That's the kind of thing you're talking about. I like these kind of metaphors that you're talking about, because that's indeed what we see a lot of things happening. Now, I noticed then when we're talking that you're really, yeah, you're a driven person because you have so much things you want to share, so much knowledge, I would say. So do you know where that drive, that passion of you is coming from?
I think it's that I want to help people who were in my position back in the day, where I'd be at work and I would try and make a suggestion about, hey, can we get some tools to do some automation? Or, it was really frustrating. I used to rant about we didn't have automated testing, and so it made the builds really long because we did these manual smoke tests, and developers would complain that builds took so long. And I'd rant about we don't have automated testing, but once I started to present the data to my peers and to my leadership, I started to get traction.
And so you want to give the same thing to the people that you work with now?
I'd really like to help people who think that they don't have the agency, that they think that they're stuck with accountability but without authority to influence change. And to them, I want to say somebody is going to influence your boss. So it might as well be you. I mean, I feel like if I can do that, others can do that too. I think,
You want to be kind of example saying, well, I was in your position, I did it once, I just, like what I hear you say, you looked at the data, you find a way to present it, to make it visible,
mhm.
and in that way convince your boss. That's what I'm hearing, and you want to, yeah, kind of give the
Improve,
example to the people to that they
yeah,
can do the same thing as what you do.
yeah, just improve your world. You know,
Um,
for the worker bees, in the trenches, who are working so hard and such long hours, and especially this last couple years, where people working remote, they're getting, we have this lack of uh, community with respect to seeing people in person. There's been a lot of illnesses on top of this pandemic, and so much, I could go on and on about this topic, but it's tough times right now. I think people need to really be gentle and kind with themselves and allow themselves time to take breaks during meetings. I always schedule my meetings at 5 after or 5 2 with my customers.
yes, great idea. It's to give people some space. That's a really great tip.
Give people
It's
time to, yeah.
but like
Otherwise,
you say, we want people to yeah, people might. Why I see a lot of people, and I want to stress what you said. I see a lot of people around me. They don't realize we want to keep doing and working and even better as before the pandemic, but we forget that we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's been taking for 2 years. Okay, in some countries the numbers go up, and others that it goes down. So it's somewhere. It's not yet clear. I think we're not completely out of it. We're recording this on March 16th, so maybe this is aired, and it will take I don't know, a month or so before it's go live, and maybe the numbers are then much bigger or lower. I have no idea, so it might be feel strange when people listen to this, but right now it feels like it go back up again and become the next wave, or it, well, we don't know.
mm,
And people should be gentle about to themselves about the situation that we're in, because
yeah,
like you say, we haven't seen each other, we haven't been able, well, we I definitely haven't hugged as many people as I used to do, and I haven't seen many people in the flesh, let's put it like that, physical. So that is indeed a very hard situation. And yeah, and I like the way you bring that on. We should be gentle.
mhm,
um, you talked already about a lot of the work that you've done, so the a little parts of your career.
mhm.
Um, what do you consider your biggest achievement? What you're really proud of?
Hmm. Well, I'm I'm proud of getting a degree in computer science, with as a single mom raising two young children. That was quite a feat.
It
Um,
is. It is. I
wow,
didn't even know that you were a single mom at that time, so that's even higher.
yeah. Um, I'm I'm really happy with how my book has been received.
Mhm.
Because I just wrote it to. I was really just trying to get a handout in place when I was
For
traveling
your
around
training.
and training. Yeah, that's how that evolved. And I'm really fortunate to have a loving family, 4 children, 3 grandchildren, and we're all pretty close. So I consider that an achievement. Um,
If
because that,
you see how many hard times it is in some families, yeah, definitely. If you can keep a family together in a sense, that's how I rephrase what you're saying. That's achievement as well. That's I think that's but like you say, your book, it's been amazing how many people that have told me about your book and told me that I should read it. So it's really I think I had it before DevOps Days Ghent, but I know that it was there as well. I know that I think there were a stack of books. So yeah, there were lots of people, and just the last year already, multiple people talked about it because it's well, visualization is important, and it's yeah, you took it one next step, I would say, and so that is indeed a nice accomplishment. And well, you say I wrote it as a way to have a handout. The other book I know that for me feels written in the same way is user story mapping. When I went to the course with Jeff Patton, I received a handout for a course that later kind of turned into his book. I don't think he might fully agree because I know he worked really hard on it, but I remember receiving and getting that document and telling Jeff, like, this is great, you should turn it into a book. And it took him a long time. And in the beginning I was very frustrated. I thought, why does it take him so long? But now when I see the book, it's like, okay, I understand why it took him so long, because the book is so much better. It's yeah. And I like that part, having writing a book as part of a course is you can keep evolving, you can keep working on it, and you get feedback from that. So yeah, I'm not surprised it was created that way, because it helps everyone, I think. So it helps to get a great book, and I think the result is there to prove it to you.
It was a wonderful experience, and because of all the hand drawings in it, I recognize that allowed me some calm. It helped, focus my mind and center, and I could do,
You did the drawings yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And
That's even yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know if you hired someone or you asked a friend or whatever. But this is wonderful, because indeed there's many different things, and it's one of the things that attracted me to the book originally when I received the copy and I just flipped through it. It's not boring text. There's many, what is it, the thief time or the time thief somewhere at the end.
Yeah, 5 days at a
Uh,
time. Well,
yeah,
it can be a complicated subject to talk about, and I felt like describing it through the thieves of time brings everybody in, and the drawings draw the hand drawings draw the eye in, because it's new, it's novel, and people are wondering, what is this? And so I felt like that in that way, people are able to easier for them to connect and understand the ideas of too much, and what happens when you have this additional cognitive load on your team, which increases with more stress, which everybody's under a lot. So
yeah,
yeah.
it worked. It worked. That's definitely something I can say. I want to go to because you mentioned already a few small tips. I wonder if you do have a personal agility tip. Of course, your whole book is about this kind of tips, but is there something, a way that you work, that you think you really want to give out to the world and say, this is something that might be interesting for people to know?
Yeah. Well, I think in order to be agile and go with the flow, we need to be prepared for uncertainty and lots of change, and things being unpredictable.
Hmm.
And I think there's no better way to do that than through yoga. So I
Okay.
take time every morning to do yoga and meditate so that I free my mind from overthinking and the cognitive overload. And so I feel like this helps me sort of like take on, it's another new day, it's another day, and I can boss that. I can be in supporting my family and my friends when I'm calmer and have found my peace.
And so you start your day with that, because I know some people who do it at the end to say, I want to release whatever stress from the day. But you start your day because that gives you more energy the rest of the day and to give you the calm mind. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, I do both. I do
Wow.
morning and evening before bed. Really trying to work on my sleep. I want to improve my sleep. Have you read the Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep? And he's got a
Yes.
masterclass on it. Oh my gosh, the impact of sleep and the lack of sleep. Like 12 years ago, I wrote a paper for Cutter. And actually Patrick Debois wrote a piece for it too. But I talk about how sleep doesn't happen, or quality doesn't happen on 5 hours of sleep, night after night after night. It's just in the long term, what that does to the body is pretty bad. And we see a lot of people traditionally in IT ops, burning
Yeah,
out.
when you talked about earlier people having sleeping bags on the under the desk, which was kind of the habit in larger corporations sometimes into IT that time. I remember a story from, I think it was some from Microsoft, that said we
Yeah.
were 6 months or 1 year behind schedule, and he brought it back by sending people home to actually make them more sleep. And people wanted to flee the project because they felt like, oh, I cannot be productive, or what is this crazy manager doing? But he's actually making sure that his people made less mistakes, because and I don't even want to talk about 8 or 10 hours, but once you go past 10, 12 hours, then you definitely, your mind is not at the same level. And if you don't sleep enough, that's definitely. And the book that you mentioned, Why We Sleep, it has so much knowledge, so much in depth on why this is important, why we need to do it. I think that's the book also that explains why coffee, what's the effect of coffee has. It's there is a lot of knowledge in that book. Um, yeah, I don't sleep that well as after I read it. I know that the first year after I read it, I was really like, I need to get my sleep. I should get better again at it. But yeah, I was really impressed with the data that's in the book, and I felt it when I started to do some of the things that was in there. I really felt that difference in my body. So you're completely right. That's a wonderful book.
So
So that's a great tip.
I have a question for you. So when do you get off your screens? Are you able
Ah,
to get off your screens, 2 hours or 3 hours before your
well,
bed?
yes and no. That depends on days, not always. But yes, I do read a lot in before I try to go to bed. So,
As a
for
book
example,
or on your screen?
not on the phone. If I read it on the screen, it's a Kindle, which is how's it called? There is no lighting from it, so it's really a passive screen in a sense. So, and I can, if I read, indeed, if I put on my phone too late indeed before going to bed, I will definitely sleep worse. That's an effect that I see, and I see that with a lot of people, with my children. I see that with lots of people.
Yeah. Um, so there's something like 45% of young children now in the US are getting myopia, which is a condition where you're losing your long distance vision because they're on
Always, exactly.
so much. And I think this is one of the biggest addictions. I'll call it an addiction. An addiction being something that we know is not good for us to do, but we still do it. And whether that's drugs or alcohol or whatever, screen time is impacts our dopamine levels.
Yeah, I see definitely that younger. Well, I would say these generations these days, we we cannot get long attention spans where many people have a lot harder to, and I see it for myself as well. I've always been a good reader. I can read for a very long time, but that's definitely has been diminished the last, let's say, 10 years. That's definitely is a lot harder. And sleep is part of the sleep. So lack of sleep is for a lot of people part of it, but not only, like you say, the fact that we have the screens and we have I turn off all how they call all notifications everywhere. I don't get notifications for emails since a long time, but same for whatever things. It's it doesn't help us. That's another really good tip about trying to turn off our devices long before we try to go to bed. I want to go to a next tip about remote work. You already no, that's not that one. This is the question about where is it remote work. What have you learned, or what is a tip that you can share for remote work?
I have observed that when you go more than if you go more than 5 or 6 people on a Zoom, people don't have cameras will start to go off and there won't be as much engagement. And that so if you want engagement, doing a workshop, and I want engagement, I want to work with 5 people.
So also not just limit the work in progress, limit the number of people in progress, or limit the number of people in the meeting, in a sense.
I mean, that doesn't always work, it depends on the kind of meeting, but if you're going to get some work done and make decisions and do some learning, I think it's best to have a smaller, intimate group. Because I think people are craving during this period of COVID, and also people who can work remote. For people who are going back to the office, most everybody that I talk to, they still want to work from home maybe 2 or 3 days a week and just go into the office 2 or 3 days a week so that they can get the benefit of the water cooler conversations that are missing. And so that's one thing is if possible for working sessions, because if it's a working session, it's like being at a whiteboard, right? You're doing
You
some
can't
drawing.
have 10 people at the whiteboard. There is no space at the whiteboard.
Well, I mean, you might have people observing or listening, but it's really just a handful of people that are trying to design something, right? And so that's one thing is meaningful meetings. I think where people aren't shy to turn their cameras on. I do turn my camera on when I'm speaking, but if I'm at a meeting with a lot of people on it and I'm just there to listen or to observe, then I might turn my camera off, especially if I'm trying to get something to eat. But I really try hard not to eat during meetings. And I also thought it was pretty funny that so I set up a meeting with my team around noon weekly, and it was just to like pretend like we're going out to lunch. Like remember the days in the office and you go out to lunch with people from your team. And I wondered, why is it that you go out to lunch and you're all eating in front of people, but that nobody wants to eat on the screen?
In front of the camera. Yeah, exactly. I see. Yeah.
They're friends, And somebody answered, they said, It's because you don't watch yourself eat when you go out to lunch with your team. You don't
But
watch yourself eat. Yeah.
I hear a lot of people indeed, and there is, I think, Teams. I'm not sure Teams. I think Zoom allows already to turn off your own feed for yourself. So
Mhm.
that, yeah, a lot of people don't like watching yourself themselves when they're on screen and things like that. So it's
Yeah.
I can see that. So that's a very good observation. You don't see yourself eat. So in that sense, yeah, it's a noise if you see yourself eating on screen. And that's a really good
In
observation.
general, right? We're not used to looking at ourselves all day on the camera. So I can understand that. But I do think that if you're in a meeting and you're speaking, you should have your camera on.
So, well, I know lots of people have excuses for all kind of things, but it definitely is. The more people have their cameras on, the more engaging it is. And when people are turning off their cameras, or like you say, when we have too many people in the meeting, but that's the same thing in a physical meeting. If there's 20 or 30 people, not all of us are engaged all the time because it's hard. Also, in a physical meeting with so many people,
Mhm.
it's there is probably also the fact that there's only 5 people who are active at the same time. It might not be the same 5 in the whole meeting. It might jump around a bit, but we're not all 30 active in such a thing. So that's a real good observation. I will try to look into that in the next weeks, indeed, if I can limit the number of people who are in these meetings. So, and I would really be interested to people in the comments as well. Do you see the same behavior? Do you do the same thing? Do you turn on your camera? Do you turn off your camera? Or do you like seeing yourself eating? That's another interesting part. I haven't, yeah, I don't mind that much, but I do prefer not to have meetings around noon or whatever,
Mhm.
except for the kind of ones that you talk about when we're just socializing and doing an ad on camera. I have done that already multiple times as well. But that's for me is not a work meeting. That's more socializing
Yeah.
on camera, and that's yeah, good observations there. Thank you for sharing this. We're already 1 hour busy, so I know that you have a tight schedule. So I'm going to skip the question about books because we already talked about a few books in this year, and the book that you really wanted to talk about, we already talked about. So I want to go to that next. For me, the one of the most interesting questions is what question do you think I should ask you, and what's the answer?
Hmm. Oh, geez. Um, I don't know. Maybe what I'm up to next.
That's definitely something I want to know because you talked already about so many interesting things that yeah, I really like to know what's up for you next.
Yeah. Um,
Please share.
well, I did just put out an online course with IT Revolution. It's they call
Hmm.
it an immersion class, and it's going through many of the exercises in the book and the new exercises that is coming out with the second edition. Um, and so I feel like I just want to take a breather. So always good to take a breather. Um,
Well, it's interesting because if you do an online, the way I understand it's an online course, so a lot of us we will see you in action, or we can work with you, but you can take a breath. Yeah, you can take some relaxing time.
but I think,
Uh,
yeah, for part of the course, I think includes a couple live sessions with me. So I will need
okay.
to gear up for that. Um, but so I've been not as busy as I have been in the past because of the book and the immersion class and my work at Task Top. So what's next is kind of reviewing my goals and getting a real clear picture of how I can best, how I can bring the real Dominica to the table to whoever needs it most. Right?
Okay, so that's interesting. And do you have already an idea what you mean with who needs it most? Did you have already something in mind there, or do you still need to work on that?
I'm still reflecting. I feel
Yeah.
like we're almost into spring, and so it's spring with the equinox is a real period of change as
Mhm.
we move from winter to spring, and so um, working on my health and to rejuvenate and to just be prepared for um, the next items that I want to work on, which I'm still reflecting on.
But I like it. This is also a good tip for people to really, from time to time, especially after achieving something. You just released a course, the new version of the book. It's then a good moment to reflect. I see so many people, we jump in, and I have that tendency as well,
Yeah,
from going from goal to goal to goal into something else, and not always taking the time to reflect on where do we want to go, and it's the kind of the personal version of busyness that we see in companies, and actually we can achieve much more if we reflect from time to time where do we want to go. It's yeah,
I
it's a wonderful example.
Daniel Kahneman's recent interview where he talks about AI is clearly going to win, and so how will people respond to this change in technology that is happening so rapidly right now with so much uncertainty? As Yuval Harari says, we don't know how to advise our children now on what to take at university because what they study now will likely be obsolete in 10 years. And so the rate that people are going to be able to adapt to change, I think is really important to look at right now. How can we position ourselves so that we are more we're going to be able to, or we're going to at least attempt or understand the need to adapt to change very quickly and rapidly.
And well, if one thing that COVID has shown us is that we're really bad as a society to think about rapid change and to
Mhm.
yeah adapt to the ever-changing world. A lot of people were like, yeah, we need to have better think to have the best response. Well, if there is anything that COVID was, that the feedback loop was so long that we don't know what's the best response. We need to adapt and constantly adapt because the virus is adapting very quickly. And so I really like what you're saying, that we need to think as society about, indeed, when something like AI, because like you say, this is going even fast. That's one thing about technology. Technology uses itself to advance, and AI is one of these things. um, I'm not sure when and in what direction it will change, but it will definitely change a lot of things in, well, maybe not all work, but in a lot of works, and a lot more than we can think of. So that's really good advice to think. So that makes it a lot harder, of course, to answer that question, what's next for you and for all of us. But that's
Yeah, yeah. It's just it can be challenging to plan long term right now. So I think in order to be as prepared as possible, we really need to take care of ourselves. We need to be kind to ourselves. Do something for yourself every day. Do something for your relationships because those can bring you strength when you need it. And there's always ups and downs, right? Everybody suffers. Nobody escapes the suffering. So, how can you position yourself to be as healthy as possible and have community and strong relationships that can support you, moving forward.
Yeah, it's like you say, it's the relationships and it's the people around you that will make you go through all the suffering that we have, because all some of us are suffering more than others, that's for sure. But if you have supporting people around you, it can make some of the suffering feel a lot less. Suffering is maybe the wrong word, but it more bearable. Let me put it
Yeah.
like that. That you can feel more.
We're social creatures, right? This isolation is really hard on single people or elderly people.
Well,
So
yeah, who are typically more single or yeah, more locked down, have less friends over time. Younger people have a lot more friends, and but I also see the same thing with my children. The fact that they were in school and they needed their friends much more than I needed them, in the sense that so yeah, I saw that for them it was a lot harder. For me, I could feel kind of connected, like with conversations like this, with social media, to keep connected to people around the world. I don't know how long I could stand it. If I could do this another 5 years, that would probably be hard. But yeah, I can look further into the future, which was a lot harder for the younger people I saw around me. And that brings me actually to that very, very last question. Like, okay, who do you think I should ask next? Who is a person to connect to that you think is really a good idea to talk next to?
oh. Does it matter geography?
No, as long as I'm able to contact them, and well, you can propose anyone, and then I will be able to see, or I'll see later on if I can contact them. Not yes or no. I've been talking with people in Pakistan. I've been talking to people in New Zealand. So yeah, I think.
What about Manuel Pais, author of Team Topologies?
Oh, that's also a good name to talk to. Yes,
Yeah,
indeed. That's
he talks a lot about cognitive load too. Um, that just sort of came top of mind. I might have to get back to you on that one because there's a lot of Cat Swetel. Oh my gosh. Interview Cat Swetel.
Kat is definitely one of the persons that I would love to talk to. So, so yes, she's an amazing woman. So I'm happy that she was already on my list, but there's many people on my list that I hope that somebody will just invite. And Kat is definitely one of these people that I was just sure that someone would invite her. So that's now I have the excuse to contact her and say, well, so that's definitely a good idea as well. So thank you for these two names.
Yeah, they call Cat the Joan Jett of wordly mapping. So I always learn so much from her. She's amazing.
And then with that, you bring in rock and roll as well. So that's kind of nice. I just I've well, longer time ago, but this year I finished the biography or the book that Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters wrote, and he wrote about Joan Jett and yeah, how his daughter met her, and so it's for me it links, and I can yeah definitely see some links there. So good additions there. So thank you very much for your time. If people want to contact you, what is a good way to contact you?
Right now, I think LinkedIn is probably the best way.
Best way to contact you. It's like yeah, it's a default kind of answer. A lot of people think that it's a good way. There's a lot of spam on LinkedIn, so sometimes it can be annoying, but it still is for me well one of the best business ways to contact people. So thank you very much for your time. It was a lovely conversation. I hope we managed to do it more or less in the time that you had. Yeah, I think we could talk for another 3 hours, but I knew that you were limited on time, so that's why I did it. It's not it's not the longest interview, but it's close to that. because it was so interesting. So I'm really I felt bad for sometimes trying to go to that next question because I want to limit your time that you had available. But it was wonderful listening to all your stories. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was really nice to spend some time with
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.